We welcome in Sabrina Strickland, Dr. Sabrina Strickland from the Hospital for Special Services. Is it more appropriate to call you Doctor or Sabrina?
Either one is fine.
Okay. Well, I'll give you the title that you've earned, and that is Doctor.
Okay.
Good morning. How are you?
Yes.
Good morning.
My question is, initially, when you're dealing with highly conditioned athletes, is that an asset to you as a doctor or not?
Absolutely, because usually they rebound from an injury much quicker than the rest of us.
Interesting. Now, talking about rebound, Kawhi Leonard of the San Antonio Spurs, we thought, after he missed the first 27 games of the year, he's got this quad problem, and now he's out again indefinitely. What can you tell us about this type of injury? Do you think he'll need surgery? Did he need surgery before? Quads are tricky. It's forced players to retire in the past. What's up with Kawhi Leonard, do you think?
Well, obviously it's a pretty unusual thing to be out this long. I mean, quad. If you were a swimmer, this would never be an issue. But when you're a basketball player and you require this much jumping, the quad is super important, as is your patellar tendon. And it's pretty rare that it requires surgery. Almost always, the only reason we operate on it is if it's torn. And so if it's just tendinotic or degenerated, it should get that back with rehab. That's a lot of games to miss for this type of injury.
Dr. Strickland, when it comes to basketball players, particularly the 7-footers, 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot and up, you're dealing with athletes that, just by the nature of their makeup, they're susceptible to foot injuries because there's not a lot of strength down there to handle all this jumping and leaping and so on and coming down awkwardly sometimes. So, I mean, what do you tell a prospective patient that's dealing with these foot injuries? I mean, is there a total remedy for this?
Well, if we're talking about the foot, a lot of times, yeah, there's a remedy. It's just a matter of strengthening and optimizing their mechanics. But when you go up to the knee, if the tendon's not of good quality, it can be really, really hard to get it to remodel. And when you talk about surgery for an injury that's degenerative, what are you going to do? Are you going to take out the bad part and hope something better grows in there? It's much more complicated. If somebody tears their ACL, you can make a new one. But if their tendon's poor quality, which is what tendinopathy essentially is, you can't just make a new one. You got to get that tendon to remodel, and that's tricky.
Let me give you a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
And I'm dealing specifically with Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers. When he came back after essentially missing 2 years, I mean, the remedy from the team's point of view was don't play him the second night of back-to-backs, manage his minutes. What's your suggestion to the team's hierarchy?
Well, I think that's one way to go, but I'm sure during that entire period, he was having all sorts of other treatments, meaning we do platelet-rich plasma injections, you do specific types of strengthening. There's all sorts of modalities to try to encourage that tendon to remodel. But ultimately, when we work out, and certainly a professional athlete, the amount of time they spend on the court, they are breaking down a little bit and they're building back up. So if their body's not doing a good job for whatever reason, building it back up, it just degenerates, and then you're in a whirlpool going down the drain. It's just a real problem because there's no. 2 years is a long time, and 27 games is a long time.
Mm-hmm. Now, switching over to Isaiah Thomas, as you know, he's been back from the hip problem that knocked him out of the first few months of the season. And now he's not complaining, but he says, he's got to get his legs back. But a lot of people thought he should have had hip surgery to begin with. I don't know where you stood on that, but do you think that he'll be okay here, just finishing out the season strong with this hip thing, or do you think this is something that could flare up again for him?
Well, it can always flare up again, and nobody can make the call until you've successfully recovered if surgery is the right answer for many of these injuries. Certain injuries are a complete no-brainer. You tear something, you have to put it back. Mm-hmm. But when it's a more degenerative process, you don't know till they're fully recovered and they're back, which makes the decision making really difficult. I mean, I think there's a good chance you can be fine.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Sabrina Strickland from the Hospital for Special Surgery. In your memory, what's been the most difficult case you've ever had to deal with?
Well, I get the special distinction of most of my patients already had 2, 3, 4 surgeries before they get to me. Mm-hmm. And so, I think it's really difficult when you have a high-level athlete, but I have plenty of patients who are 16 or 17 and have trouble going up and down the stairs at school. So I think it's all about what you're going to miss. And so certainly if you're going to not get to play in college because you're going to miss your senior year at sport, that's emotionally difficult and very sad to see. But I think the range is unfortunately vast of difficult cases I see.
Mm-hmm. This year the NBA has decided they started the season a little bit earlier. They wanted to make it easier on players to avoid injuries, getting them more rest at times by eliminating, the 4 games in 5 nights. They still have the back-to-back. I was wondering, just from your view, do you think that will, in the long run, be better off for the players, or are we putting too much stock into this whole revamping of the schedule?
No, I think that's incredibly important. You need some time to rest, and of course you can't rest if you have back-to-back games. Mm-hmm. And basketball is not like baseball where you spend a lot of time sitting around. I mean, basketball is very hard on the body, and I think especially for a sport like that, I think it's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. And do you, what's your stance when the players tend to play year-round now? Do you think that's good, or you think that it should actually back off some of their playing in the off season?
No, I think they should back off in the off season. We've proven this in kids and high school athletes. If you look at a lot of professional athletes, they didn't concentrate on one sport till they got to college, and we know for younger athletes that staying and just playing one sport is not good for their body. So I think playing year-round is suboptimal.
Hey, Dr. Strickland, in today's athletic world, if it's not let me be more specific. If you're dealing with executives of teams, and there was this one scene in the movie Hoosiers when one of Gene Hackman's players goes down and the doctor says, we got to take him out of the game, and Hackman says, no, patch him up. So what I'm getting at in terms of what your responsibilities are, how many times have you dealt with either team executives or school officials or parents that say, oh, never mind that, just get them ready to play? How many times have you dealt with that?
A lot, and I think the trend, I think there's a lot more public awareness of the downside to that. So I do think it's getting a little bit better, but certainly parents and coaches can't imagine that the kid can't go back. We think of these kids and young athletes, 22, 25, 28, that they're resilient and they're going to be fine. And at 26 playing basketball, that's not a particularly old player. So you think that they're invincible, and they're not. So I think the trend is getting better, but that may be just an optimistic view of it.
Appreciate your time, Doctor. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Doctor.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Dr. Sabrina Strickland, Hospital for Special Surgery.